Well, hello again, listeners. Welcome back. We are on part 3 of Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen. Last episode, we finished off with chapters 6 through 8, and this episode, we're starting with chapter 9. Chapter 9 is called If We Stop Thinking, What Do We Do About Our Goals, Dreams, and Ambitions? Napoleon Hill once said, "There are no limitations to the mind except those that we acknowledge. I think, therefore I suffer." My new mantra, I think, therefore I suffer. When I finally understood that thinking was the root cause of my suffering, I was jumping up and down, exhilarated, relieved, and grateful for discovering the true reason for everything negative I've experienced. This ecstasy was short-lived, though, because soon after the exuberance settled, the following thoughts popped into my head. If thinking is the root cause of all of my suffering, and I stop thinking, then how do I live life now? What about all of my goals, my dreams, and my ambitions? Do I stop wanting things in life? Will I devolve into a couch potato and not do anything with my life anymore? In case you were wondering, yes, I'm a telepathic, and yes, I can read your mind. I'm just kidding. But if you are wondering how I wrote the exact or very similar questions and know what thoughts you most likely have right now, it's because I am also human, contrary to popular belief. All of us are going through similar journeys of awakening to our true selves, so rest assured that many people are having the same thoughts you are having right now as you come to see your true magnificence. And this is true whenever you start to unravel the truths of who you are, which everybody does this, probably on a semi-annual or annual basis. Why? Because as we grow, we learn, and we experience new things, we evolve. That is part of being a human. That is part of growing. That is part of gaining knowledge and experience. Is the growth that comes with it. Now, back to what we do about our goals, dreams, and ambitions if we stop thinking. As I pondered these questions, an incredible amount of fear and anxiety began to surface because I thought that I would have to give all of it up or become a monk in the middle of the mountains. Been there. I was not ready to do that. As much as I wish I were enlightened and detached from my life, I genuinely enjoyed being in the world, experiencing the fullness of life and other people, even if a large portion of my life was filled with suffering. Here's what I've discovered about what to do with our goals and dreams with this new understanding. As we've mentioned in previous chapters, there's a difference between thoughts versus thinking. The source of thoughts and the source of thinking are different, and the source is what will dictate whether it causes suffering or not. It's going to be about thought selection. Selecting our thoughts is tuning into a different radio station frequency, essentially. So, similarly, where our goals and dreams come from will determine whether we feel great about pursuing them. Like everything in this world, there is nothing inherently good or bad, only our thinking makes us so. Goals, dreams, and ambitions are not good or bad, so it's not an either-or situation, but more where the goals are coming from. There are two sources of goals: goals created out of inspiration and goals created out of desperation. When goals are created out of desperation, we feel an immense sense of scarcity and urgency. It feels heavy, like a burden. We may even feel daunted by the colossal task we've just committed ourselves to. Imposter syndrome and self-doubt will begin to manifest, and we always feel like we never have enough time for anything. Hell yeah, I know exactly how this feels. We go about our lives frantically, desperately searching for answers and ways to accomplish our goals faster, always looking externally, never feeling enough or that we can ever get enough. Worst of all, if we can achieve our goal within a few hours or days afterwards, all of those feelings, all of those lack begin to resurface. We start not feeling content with what we've done, unable to savor our accomplishments, and because what we did never feels like it's enough, we feel that same way about ourselves. Not knowing what else to do, we look around for guidance externally to see what others are doing and see if they're continuing to do the same thing. Thus, we proceed to set another goal out of desperation in an attempt to escape all of the negative feelings gnawing away at our souls. When we dig a little deeper into these types of goals that we set, they are all typically means goals and not end goals. In other words, the goals we set in this desperation are all a means to an end. There's always a reason we want to accomplish the goal, and it's always for something else. For example, we want to create a multi-million-dollar business because we want financial freedom or to quit our jobs to escape the stress and anxiety that comes from it. We feel like we have to do these things instead of want to do these things. Goals created from desperation are typically realistic and created from analyzing our past and what we think to be plausible at that moment. It feels very confining and limiting. Although these goals and dreams may excite us in the moment, as soon as we begin to try to create them, we feel a lack and are desperate to bring the dream to life. Paradoxically, if we achieve a goal created out of desperation, we end up feeling even more empty than before. The next logical thing we tend to do is set an even bigger goal out of an even greater desperation to hopefully make us feel whole on the inside. I talked about this the last episode. We absolutely will do things in our life that we think we have to do in order to survive or in order to live a life that we've created in our head. Maybe it was 20 years ago. So then we actively change the pathway of our entire existence to fit the goals in our head. But the goal with that too is to adapt your goals as you also change. What you wanted 20 years ago, it may not be what you want today. You hear me talk time and time again throughout this podcast of all the different ways that I built a career and completely changed what I wanted to do in my life. Just like the first time I went to college and got my associate's degree was in accounting. Well, then I reverted, and when I got my bachelor's degree, so I switched up, and then I went and got my bachelor's degree in human resource management. Well, then when I started looking back into going to school and I got accepted for the master's program, it was in business management. Now I'm looking into another master's degree program, but it's for counseling. So you have to adapt your goals as you adapt in life, as you grow in life. Back to the book. This is how most of us set our goals and live our lives. I'm also not saying this to criticize or judge at all, but to reveal the reality of it. The only reason I could describe it in the excruciating detail was because that was my life. Here's the good news. It's not your fault you set goals the way it's not your fault you set goals that way if you are, and there's a way out. It's through creating goals and dreams out of inspiration instead of desperation. When we create goals out of inspiration versus desperation, it is an entirely different story. In this state, we're creating because we feel deeply moved, inspired, and expansive. It feels like we have a calling rather than an obligation. It is like a powerful force of life coming from within us, wanting to be expressed through us to be manifested into the physical world. This is why painters paint, dancers dance, writers write, and singers sing. Even if they never get paid or make a living from it, we feel pulled by a force to create something. We gravitate towards it. We feel compelled to do it. And when we feel like this, we create from a place of abundance instead of lack. Most surprising is that in this state, we are creating not for any reason other than simply wanting to. We don't create because we feel like we have to. We create because we want to, and there's just no other reason. We aren't creating these goals we aren't creating these goals so that we can do something else or use it as a means to get something else that we want. This type of creation comes from a place of wholeness and abundance. It's an overflowing of love and joy for life. This is the reason why most of us want or do have kids. It's not just so that we can milk our kids for their money. It's not so that we can milk our kids for their money once they're old enough to work and use them as a retirement plan. We want to have kids because we want to share the abundance of what we have with them. And it comes from a place of sharing that we have lots of versus trying to get something out of them. We want to have kids because we want to share the abundance of what we have with them. And it comes from a place of sharing what we have lots of versus trying to get something out of them. This feeling of deep inspiration is incredibly difficult to describe because it does not come from this world. It doesn't come from us, but through us from something greater than us. I like to call this feeling divine inspiration because our ideas and vision of what we want. I like to call this feeling divine inspiration because our ideas and vision of what we want to create seem far bigger than what we could have imagined or come up with ourselves. Since divine inspiration doesn't come from us, but from something greater, it doesn't analyze or rely on past data or what you or anyone else has accomplished. Divine inspiration happens when groundbreaking inventions are created that seemed impossible not too long ago. It knows no boundaries, limits, or constraints. It is an expansive force that energizes and lifts us, making us feel high on life. In this state, we feel whole, complete, and filled with unconditional love, joy, and peace. We don't analyze, compare, criticize, judge, or rationalize anything, but instead, we truly live, love, share, give, create, grow, and nourish. Yes, it is one of the greatest feelings we can experience, and it is truly a gift that we can experience the divine as humans, and it's because we're from the same source. Again, you don't necessarily have to believe that to understand that the book does have merit in the points that it's making. Everyone has experienced this deep feeling and desire to create something marvelous in the world out of pure inspiration and not desperation. Before moving on to the next paragraph, I encourage you to test out this theory. Pause here and spend a few minutes thinking about a time in your life when you felt an overwhelming feeling and desire to create something magnificent because you felt deeply inspired and called to do so. It doesn't matter if you actually created it or not, but think of a time and what was the feeling that you had on the inside. When I tell you, I thought for years, my entire life, not only did I have the idea that I wanted to write a book, but I was told by multiple people, like, you should write a book about your life. And I always felt called to do it. I did not start writing that book until the last 2 years of my life. And it's still a work in progress, and now it's turned into several books that I'm writing. But my point is, I was overwhelmed for one, I wasn't just overwhelmed. I convinced myself because of my ego, like, why? Well, you know what? Like, why would I? Like, who's going to want to read this book? Everybody writes books. Why is this one going to be any different? I told myself all the things. I talked myself out of it 1,000 different times, but not into it until, the last 2 years. Isn't that just one of the most amazing feelings in the entire world? Most of us feel this divine inspiration, but then suppress it as soon as we begin thinking about doing it. 100%. You're like, oh crap, should I have signed up for this? Should I have started this project? Even if you don't look at like a big book or changing your life around, how many times have you got into the situation where you're like, I really want to paint my living room or, a big project in your house. Then you start it and you're excited. And then an hour into it, you're like, what did I do? I forgot the work involved. This takes so much time, so much energy. Right? You can think about it a billion different ways. We begin to think ourselves into doubt, rationalize why we can't do it, and tell ourselves that it is unrealistic, how we should focus on more important things, and that we're not good enough to do it. As soon as we begin to think about the thought of wanting to create, it completely shuts off the source of that inspiration, and we go back to living life as usual. When we cut off that source, we also cut off the feelings of abundance, vitality, ecstasy, joy, and pure, unconditional love. And we go back to the feelings of doubt, anxiety, frustration, sadness, fear. We feel confined, stuck, and frustrated with our lives. It's like the never-ending merry-go-round that you can't get off of until you do. And you can, because I believe in you. We can only ever follow one calling at a time, either in inspiration or desperation in the present moment. The two cannot coexist simultaneously. But we can fluctuate between the two depending on how much thinking is going on. When we stop thinking, we don't stop having goals and dreams. We fall back into our true nature and create goals and dreams out of inspiration versus desperation. We begin to allow thoughts from the universe to come into our mind, leading us to divine inspiration to create something that has never been created before. Following divine inspiration makes us feel alive, whole, joyful, love, peace, and fulfillment. So, how can we tell when a goal or dream is created out of inspiration or desperation? A simple way to know if a goal or dream is created out of inspiration is to remember the distinction between thoughts and thinking. Goals and dreams that come in the form of thought are created out of inspiration. Goals and dreams that come from thinking are created out of desperation. Typically, when we think, we analyze, judge, criticize, and rationalize, and then we'll use our past to create our new goals. But this form of creating goals feels restricting and limiting. We don't typically feel good when creating these types of goals, and when we're pursuing them, we do not feel great either, since it's out of desperation. Another way to identify the two is to sense how you feel energetically. Goals and dreams created out of desperation are going to feel heavy and draining, confining and empty. We tend to feel a lot of scarcity, fear, and stress, like we have to do it and are obligated to. With these types of goals, it seems like if we do not accomplish them, there will be dire consequences, hence the high pressure and the stakes. I'm sure you can see now how this can create a feeling of desperation. Moreover, we're trying to accomplish these goals to escape our current situation and get out of something. Our goals created in this state are typically means goals, meaning that we want to achieve these goals so that we can do something else afterwards, such as having the goal to quit our job. Most likely, you'll have this goal because you want to do something you actually enjoy, but you can see how the goal of quitting your job is just a means goal for you to do something else. Or having a goal of making $1 million is typically set because you want financial freedom and travel the world. These goals are always a means to an end, not the end itself. There's always a reason that we want to accomplish these goals, and it makes us feel very empty inside. I've been there. I have absolutely been there. I want to emphasize that none of these goals are inherently wrong, or that we shouldn't have goals of wanting to make money or quitting our jobs. If these goals are created from inspiration, that's entirely different. It just depends on the source of the goals and not necessarily the goal itself. This is an important distinction to make. Otherwise, you're going to spend most of your time debating and stressing yourself out more over if this is the right goal or not. There is no right or wrong goal, only goals created from inspiration or desperation. It just depends on how you want to feel on the inside and when you're aware of these two types of goals and then how they manifest. You'll be able to feel a little blissful as you create amazing things in your life. On the other hand, goals and dreams created out of inspiration, which comes from the thought, feel very light, energizing, uplifting, and expansive. We tend to feel excited, joyful, and most importantly, inspired. We don't feel like we have to create it, but we want to create it. We don't feel like, instead of feeling like you need to do this, you feel inspired to. There is virtually no pressure because we're not trying to get out of something or escape our current situation by accomplishing this goal. There's no scarcity or urgency because we don't feel like we're creating from a place of lack, but instead from a place of abundance and just want to share it with the world. Since it's coming from inspiration, we're not doing it to get something out of it so that we can do something else. It's not a means goal, but simply an end in and of itself. There is no reason we need to create it. We are not creating to feel whole, but because we feel whole and want to give from that place, not expecting anything from it. I'm sure you can see the stark difference between the two now and from the two now, and that you can tell which type your goals currently fall under. Yes, I can definitely block my goals or I can definitely categorize my goals into two types of goals for sure, just sitting here thinking about it. If most of your goals fall under desperation, don't worry because most people have goals created from desperation, including myself before I knew a better way. So, how do we create goals and dreams out of inspiration versus desperation? Well, creating goals and dreams from the inspiration isn't something you have to try to do. We naturally have thoughts of infinite and inspiration all the time. If you look at children, they naturally have the wildest dreams and imaginations of what they want to do. It almost doesn't even register in their minds that they can't do something most of the time. The only difference between us and children is that we have learned to shut down all of these thoughts of inspiration, which contain our dreams, hopes, and goals that we generally want to see manifested into the world. Our minds are filled more with reasons of why we can't than thoughts of what we want to create. We innately have an infinite flow of inspiration that comes through us, but we block that flow as soon as we begin thinking about our thoughts, which causes self-doubt, self-sabotage, and anxiety. Think of the flow of inspiration to create like a river. The river always flows until man puts something there to block it, like a dam. Then the dam is there. Then, when the dam is there, we ask why there are so many fish dying, animals disappearing, and forests dwindling, when all we needed to do was return the river to its natural state and everything will be working perfectly fine the way nature intended it to. This is the same for our minds and our goals. We always dream, have big goals, and know what to do when we're tapped into our intuition, free from thinking. If we do not think about our thoughts, any thoughts about dreams, goals, and desires that naturally arise are all from the divine, and that is how you create goals out of inspiration versus desperation. A question that significantly helps me to settle thinking and tap into the limitless well of possibilities of what I could create is, quote, if I had infinite money, already traveled the world, had no fear, and didn't receive any recognition for what I do, what would I do or create? Whenever we ask questions, answers always arise. It is impossible for our brains to hear a question and not come up with a response. So when you ask yourself this question, whatever begins to come up for you without any manual thinking will be from the divine and inspiration versus desperation. The way the question is worded is critical because it removes most of the thinking, the fear, the criticism, and external reasons why you would want to do something. So it focuses your answer on what you genuinely want to create. Usually it's for no reason other than you were just wanting to create it because it's fun, without any influences from the material world. Try asking the question and see what comes up for you. You'd be surprised at what surfaces, but don't get caught up in your thinking when your true dreams begin to be revealed to you. To a mind without the limits of thinking, anything is possible. Chapter 10. We're getting close, actually. Unconditional love and creation. Tony Green said, "The greatest power that mankind could ever achieve is the power of unconditional love. This is when people love with no limitations, conditions, or boundaries." Unconditional love. I learned unconditional love from my extraordinary partner, McKenna. For most of my life, I always questioned everything. I had to know the reason why things were the way they were. Otherwise, I would go crazy. I am the same exact way. 100%. I have to know how everything works together. I need to see the bigger picture. Naturally, as anyone would in a relationship after dating for about a year, I asked McKenna why she loved me. She innocently replied that she didn't know why. She just knew that she did. Then she asked me why I loved her, and I listed a dozen of the different reasons why. It ranged from her beautiful smile to her adorable laugh and how pure her heart is, how much she loves her family, how intelligent she is, and the list goes on. We dated for 7 years before we got married, and every few months after the first time I asked, I would ask her why she loved me. And even up until this point, she still said the same thing. I don't know. I just know that I love you a lot. This slightly bothered me for so long because I didn't understand why she didn't know why she loved me. I could list 50 reasons why I loved her, but she couldn't list a few. Throughout the years, I still loved her so much that I didn't mind that she didn't know. I just accepted it and continued loving her anyways because I couldn't help myself. It wasn't until a few months ago that it dawned on me why she couldn't think of why she loved me. I began to question the reasons that I had for why I loved McKenna. Then I had an epiphany that changed my life forever. I asked myself, did I love her because of her laugh or because she loves helping other people? What happens if she doesn't laugh one day or doesn't help someone that day? Do I stop loving her if she doesn't do the things I said were why I love her? I realize that if I create reasons for why I love her, then it makes my love for her conditional to those specific traits or actions. And if she doesn't do them, then I don't love her. This is, of course, not true. But at that moment, I had the awe-inspiring insight that McKenna couldn't list reasons why she loved me because her love for me was unconditional. There were no reasons why she loved me. If she had reasons, it would mean she only loved me if I were exuding those traits or doing those things she had in her mind. Aw. Her love for me is not based on my mood or what I did. Her love for me goes beyond all reasons and does not come from a place of reciprocity. She does not love me because I love her, nor is she loving me because of what I can do for her. She is experiencing so much love within herself that it's an outpour of an abundance of love that she's just gifting me unconditionally. Attempting to articulate that feeling of this and where it comes from is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life because I'm attempting to describe the indescribable. From this experience, I learned to make my love for McKenna unconditional by not placing reasons or conditions for when I would love her. Because if I did that by default, I would put conditions on when I would not love her. There's just so much love in me now because I've experienced it. There's simply an outpour of unconditional love where I can't help but love her no matter what. This unconditional love doesn't come from external reasons, but from within, from the infinite source we all come from. We are all connected to this pure unconditional love, which is God or the universe or whichever name you choose to use. The only thing that gets in the way of this is our own thinking, which separates us from that of unconditional creation. Unconditional creation is the purest form of creation that there is. When something is created from unconditional love, we can't help but stand there and admire it in awe. Unconditional creation is always innovative. It's always unique. It's always new. It's always captivating, bold, different, and revolutionary in its own way. Very few people operate in this space because we always put conditions around what we do or what we make. For example, whenever we are working to achieve the goal of making more money, we might try to create income for ourselves. This is conditional creation because no one wants money just to have money. Most people want money for something else or to be able to use it for another thing that they want. Again, money buying time, which is freedom. Money buying the freedom to not stress about bills. This, by nature, makes what they are creating conditional. They are only creating this because they want something else out of it. When we create something for something else, typically we do not enjoy the process of creating because it is always just a means to an end, never an end in of itself. This is why we always feel like we're chasing, grinding, hustling, trying, and constantly stressed and overwhelmed. Even after we accomplish our goal, we'll only enjoy it for those few seconds. Then we're off to another goal we have to chase because we never actually got what we were looking for. Because we never actually got what we were looking for. What we're ultimately looking for are feelings. We want more money to get a sense of security and peace. We want to spend time with our family because it makes us feel love and joy. We want to do what we love because it gives us a sense of fulfillment. These are ultimately feelings that we are trying to get, but we keep thinking that the goal or object we want will give us those feelings. This idea is flawed because our feelings can only be generated from within us, not from external things. External things can prompt us to create the feelings, but ultimately we produce those feelings from within ourselves. What's paradoxal, like everything in the duality of life, is that when we create something without conditions or reasons, we immediately feel all the positive feelings we want. Unconditional creation is creating something without it being for another purpose, but purely to create it because we want to create it. We create it simply because we want to create it. This is creation from abundance. When we create from this state, we already feel whole inside, and all the love we want to feel is what we're feeling in that exact moment. We can only pursue unconditional creation if we are in a state of non-thinking. Our brains will make us think it is pointless to do something simply because we want to, but that is the secret. As soon as we do things for no reason, we step into the realm of living our life unconditionally. This is when we experience flow, oneness, and a direct connection to the universe. Chapter 11. What do you do next after experiencing peace, joy, love, and fulfillment in the present? R.M. Drake said, "Don't think. It complicates things. Just feel, and if it feels like home, then follow its path." If you've been applying the principles in this book, you've most likely been able to find peace through non-thinking. If not, I highly encourage you to remember that all of our negative feelings come from our thinking. All you have to do is become aware of that fact, which will settle the thinking like the debris settling in dirty water. Once you see that it is just your thinking and that there's nothing to be afraid of, you will experience true peace in your life in the present. Once you've been able to experience peace, you might be unsure what to do next. At this point, you may be experiencing worry, anxiety, and doubt. Many people, including myself, me too, wondered if they had lost their edge and drive to do anything. Don't worry, this is normal and it's part of the awakening process. You've already learned the most challenging part, to practice non-thinking and prevent negative thinking from controlling your life. You may start to feel worried, anxious, and doubtful after we've experienced peace because we just have to let go of everything we thought we knew in the world. What actually happened was the death of the personal ego. A natural consequence is that once the personal ego is threatened, it will do everything in its power to regain control over your life again. The ego is something we can't quite get rid of forever, which is why even after you experience peace, there may be feelings of doubt, worry, and anxiety, which is your ego. At this moment, the ego, thinking, will resurface to attempt to reclaim your throne. But fear not, because you've already learned how you can quickly dismantle your ego, aka your thinking, by remembering that your thinking is the only cause of your negative feelings. The point is not to try to prevent your thinking from ever entering your mind, but to shorten the time it takes to remember that it is just your thinking causing negative emotions. It's impossible to prevent thinking from happening because it's so ingrained in us. For example, it's in our human nature that when we suddenly see that we're about to step on a venomous snake on our path, we're going to freak out. Yeah, I would be losing it. But when you realize that it's just a piece of rope, you see through the illusion, knowing that your thinking caused you to become afraid. And you resume your peaceful walk on the beautiful trail. We can't prevent that initial reaction, but we can always remember the truth and return to our natural state of peace. And that's all that matters. Another reason that we may feel anxiety, worry, and doubt once we experience peace is that we are using a colossal amount of energy when we are thinking all the time. Most people spend the majority of their day in a state of stress or thinking, which consumes enormous amounts of energy. When we stop thinking, the energy we used to think is now freed up, but it hasn't been directed anywhere yet, and that happens. And what happens is we return to our old patterns of putting that energy back into thinking because that's how we were conditioned. What we can do in this case is to channel the newfound energy into our goals of inspiration. This is the cure and intervention of preventing this energy from going into overthinking. For this to work, make sure you've spent some time creating your goals out of inspiration versus desperation, and having it top of mind to channel all of your energy towards it once you experience this phenomenon. If you have only goals of desperation in mind, then directing energy towards it will only perpetuate the thinking and negative feelings. What tends to help many people in this stage is also having an activation ritual. An activation ritual is a morning routine that helps them get into a state of non-thinking and flow, and it enables you to build momentum in a positive direction immediately when you wake up, so it's easier to stay in that state of non-thinking for the rest of the day. Any object in motion will stay in motion. I've never understood why spiritual masters and all great leaders have a morning routine until I understood the power of non-thinking and momentum. Here's the good news. Now that all of your energy isn't tied into thinking anymore, you can use that freed up energy and channel it into creating new goals from inspiration to fuel and propel you into your new life full of peace, joy, and love. Chapter 12. Nothing is either good or bad. William Shakespeare said, "There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Here's an analogy that helps put this into perspective. On a piano, there are 88 keys. When we look at a piano, we don't point out specific keys for no reason and say that that key is wrong. We only think a particular key is wrong if we think someone is playing a specific song and hits a key that isn't in that song. Inherently, the piano has no wrong keys. Only keys and notes sound more or less pleasant when played consecutively. Just like how there are no wrong keys on the piano, there are no wrong decisions in life. There's only thinking that gives us pleasant or unpleasant feelings. Putting things into a bucket of right or wrong, good or bad, creates duality and conditions in our life, which determines how we feel. For instance, if we believe that opposing political parties are wrong or bad, this can cause animosity within us and make us feel a concoction of negative emotions. If, on the other hand, we see different political parties in the same way as there are different keys on the piano, or how there are no inherently wrong parties, then we open ourselves up to experience love, joy, and peace in the moment. We begin to see that there are alternative perspectives that we haven't seen before, and we have an opportunity to deepen our understanding of the true nature of life. Who are we to judge, right? Honestly, who are we to judge that someone else's decisions are good or bad? Why? Because society says they're good or bad? Well, who cares what society thinks? Society is not you. Your goals, your ambitions, your personal experiences, your wisdom, your knowledge, all of those things are you and you only. It is individualized to you. That's why it may appear to be different or weird or strange or not the societal norm when people do things that they don't typically do or that aren't in line with the status quo. It's not wrong. It's just not what they're doing. But you know how I always like to think about this? The only time I care about other people's opinions of what I'm doing is if they're paying my bills or they're hustling like me. I said this in the first episode. I will not care what you think or what your opinion is of what I do in my life unless you are paying my bills or you are living my existence. Because same for you. Nobody else's opinion matters about what it is that you're choosing to do on your pathway, because they're not living your life and they haven't had your experiences. They don't know what drives you, they don't know your passions, and they don't know your goals. So just remember that when you get worried that others might judge you when you go on a completely different life path. I can tell you right now, the amount of people in my life that are like, holy crap, I don't even know her anymore. It's not necessarily true. Correct, you know a very old past version of me. So yeah, you don't really know me anymore. But it's not that you didn't know me, you just didn't know the real me. Because all of those other things I was always doing that were distractions and taking me away from my true life path, those are the versions you knew of me. wasn't the path that wasn't serving my highest good, my highest passion. You just got to see the desperate version of me. Well, how is it desperate? I made choices in life out of desperation. I got into certain career paths out of desperation because I needed a different job or it was more money or what have you. I went to a different company that I found out wasn't ethical or that I didn't enjoy or their mission and values didn't align with mine. Well, had I taken the time or not cared and didn't take the job out of desperation or try to move up or try to live up to my own expectations that I set for myself out of desperation. Instead of looking for right or wrong, good or bad in the world, look for truth. Instead of trying to prove we are right or they are wrong or how they're better and we're worse, look for the truth in what's right in front of you. I caution this by saying that many people believe what they think is the truth. For the most part, without this more profound understanding of life, most of what we think is not the truth, even though it may seem like it. The actual truth is not subjective. If it is true for one person but not for another, then it is not a universal truth. Look for what is universally true for every conscious human being on the planet, no matter who they are, where they're from, and their background. That is the truth, and where you'll find everything you've been searching for. Remember that the only place you can find this is deep within your being. So don't try to look for it outside of you. If you're confronted with something that may stir up negative emotions, go within yourself to find the source of the universal truth that's deep within your soul. If you look for the answers outside or dig into external reasons for why you feel this way, you'll be looking for the rest of eternity and you're never going to find it. Yeah, that would have been me. Seriously, that would have absolutely been me and was me for many years. Negative emotions are an indication of misunderstanding. When negative emotions grip us, that we believe what we're thinking. At this moment, we forget where our experience comes from and that our thinking is the cause of our negative emotions. All you have to do is remember that thinking is the root cause of how we're feeling. Once this is brought to your awareness, don't fight the thinking. Just become aware that your thinking is causing the ill feelings. Welcome it with love, and it will slowly dissipate before your eyes. Give yourself grace and patience. Give yourself some grace and patience. Not too long after, you'll return to your natural state of peace, love, and joy. All right, there are a couple more chapters, but I'm not going to read them to you. I do like to leave a little bit for you to read on your own because hopefully when I read you some of these books, you want to purchase them and put them on your bookshelf as well. You are not required in any capacity to purchase this book, Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen. But I encourage you to go through the last couple chapters of the book to get an in-depth idea of not only how to follow your intuition, but a great list classified as the summary of non-thinking. Joseph put a little cheat sheet guide at the end of this book that I absolutely adore and love and gives you some examples to work through in this book. Even though I read you most of the book via these last couple of episodes, this is a book I definitely agree should be sitting on your bookshelf because you can revert back to it and still gain so much wisdom from it. There are always going to be trying times in our lives where we need to remember things that we tend to forget. And sometimes we'll forget little lines in books that end up being so significantly important later on in life. Why? Because it's in the perspective and the eyes and the ears and the five senses that you're using at the time. Your senses, your intuition, your understanding of things are always going to change. What you looked at 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, with one set of eyes could be completely different today when you look at them. It is literally all about perspective. So, I hope you enjoyed the last couple episodes regarding this book, Don't Believe Everything You Think. And I am so excited for the next couple books that we're going to be reading on this podcast. more self-help books, and of course, we're going to continue to do interviews with mentors in real life. People that I find inspiring, people that I think can give great life advice. All right, listeners, see you next time.